Boom. Let me get my audio checked out, and we'll get running here. Can you guys see my bike? I guess you kind of can. Let's see. We should be good. Give me 2 seconds, guys. When's it starting? Colin. Let me get my audio. There it is. All right. So yeah, let's do this. Hopefully you guys can't hear my fan in the background. If you can't, let me know. If it gets distracting, like just let me know. But I'm like dying, so you know I'm gonna sacrifice audio just a little bit today. But welcome back to week 2, right? So from previous weeks, right? We're taking an old illustration that I did about 2 years ago or whenever it was, and just taking it to finish, right? So here's the original, right? What it looked like, and it's fine. There's nothing like wrong with it. It's just not at the quality that, like, let's say somebody like, I don't know, like Wizards of the Coast or whoever, like said, hey, we really like this image, this thumbnail, can you take that to finish, right? This wouldn't qualify for what I would submit as a final, right? And that's kind of where we're trying to just show you how far I would push things and take things to to a final push, right? Because some of this does look pretty clean, right? Like a lot of this, where looking at this image here, boom. So like some of these areas look okay, not too bad. There's some clearness in the silhouettes there, right? But overall, when you actually zoom in, this it's not that good, right? There's a lot of loose things happening, and this, generally speaking, doesn't fly in an illustration setting, right? In a concept setting, it's usually okay. You can do things like this, and it's probably fine. But in an illustration kind of mentality, you need to go way further than this. This is what I would kind of submit as a like a round 2 kind of thumbnail, right? I would do my graphic read comp, most likely in color, but generally just kind of basic filled out shapes. Submit that, and then they'll give me notes, and then after that I'll turn in something like this, and then basically I'm kind of looking for the approval at this point, where I'm like, okay, I kind of addressed all the notes they gave me. I took it one notch further. There's a little bit more detail. Nothing's truly figured out yet, but I'm looking for them to approve for me to take to finish, right? Because when we're doing our illustrations, right, you never want to just jump to the finish line, because you could actually end up at the wrong, I guess at a wrong conclusion, right? Where the design isn't what they wanted, the mood and tone and all those things might not be what they're looking for. So you kind of want to take it step by step, right? So this is like about a medium level finish. I'd say about 75%, right? And so now from here, I would take a painting like this and then start pushing to finish, right? And so what that means is to start cleaning everything up and getting a solid sense of clarity. And then, because this painting is very like it wasn't like flat, right? I mean, it is right now, but before it wasn't really like a flat painting. It's just not consciously layered, right? Because when I did this, I was just testing out some things. On my Instagram, it said that I was just doing this before class started, essentially. So I really wasn't too worried about like submitting this or anything. So there is a level of, I would have organized the layers better if this was an actual like production piece, but it is what it is. So from there, I had to organize my layers out and then clean up some of those silhouettes, right? So from here, it's not like looking beautiful or anything quite yet, right? There's still a lot of things kind of missing. There's still a lot of pieces that I need to figure out, but there's a sense of detail here and clarity that I didn't have before, right? So for example, what I did was I just cleaned up some of the silhouettes in certain areas just to give us noise, right? Because when we're looking at buildings, right? Yeah, generally speaking, we see like, the cube, the square, the rectangle, and we see all these like kind of main shapes. But now I need to add those smaller details, right? I need to make this more realistic. And so I was using my photos, I was using the silhouette pack that I have, and just throwing everything I have to kind of make these silhouettes clean. in a normal setting, I wouldn't really ignore the internal textures as much, just because that kind of goes hand in hand with the silhouettes, right? But because we're doing, a step-by-step process, I really tried not to do anything, I guess in the interior shapes, right? Like it was mostly just getting those silhouettes down, because that's what we're going to be working on today, right? Those interior shapes. But before I do that, right, looking at this, I had this ship down and I needed some clarity, right? So there's a couple different things that's happening. I added some like atmosphere in the back here, like that cloud, to kind of give me a cleaner kind of shape, right? Because if I turn that off, right, it's not terrible, it just doesn't pop off as much as I might want, right? Same thing with like the cloud back here, same thing with this cloud there. Same thing with like, this building there. Same thing with this building. Like I'm keeping certain ideas, right? Light over dark, dark over light, dark over light, light over dark, right? Dark over light, right? I'm just making sure that my main kind of components everywhere I go, right? Dark over light. It's kind of, I'm trying to pop off this silhouette as much as possible. I'm not paying attention too much to some of the background shapes that are happening when I do that, right? Because I made the ship, I did the thing, right? And then I needed that to pop off certain areas. So there's two mentalities that you can kind of get behind when you're doing this. What I like to do is create the shapes that I need first, and then link them together if needed. For example, I just made a bunch of random shapes, not random, but I just kind of put some atmosphere shapes where I want them. And if for those that have watched me before, you've seen me use cloud brushes and things like that. I put them in and I just kind of stamp them around. I use them as necessary, right? But after that, I then start trying to identify a pattern, right? Because there's a ship here and I need the eye to kind of start looking at places. So for example, right, there's like arrows kind of pointing this way, not arrows, but like just gestures of buildings, right? And then this gesture right here, right? This is one cloud, like this cloud back here, that's one. This is another, that's two. So now I'm, if you identify that as a bigger cloud, you can get a better gesture out of it. Right now I can like make this one cloud and it's a better shape because of it. Right now it's like, you get this shape and you can have like a bottom plane there, bottom plane there. And maybe like this whole cloud kind of extends like down here or something and then comes back up. But I didn't think of that ahead of time because I don't want to have to design a larger shape. I just need to add in pieces where I need it first and then kind of go into making sense of it all. Hopefully that makes sense, right? When you go about this, there's two ways you can do it. You can just kind of, add lighting and or darkening things where you need it, or you can add larger shapes. You can do both. It doesn't really matter, but I like to kind of do it in small shapes because I only do it where it's necessary. Because there's times where like, it's not really that important. So I'm not really trying to make things pop off there. So just leave it alone, right? There's like this building here versus that building in the back. I'm just going to leave that alone, right? And there's even like, separate buildings here or like, some of this stuff right over there. It's not really, I guess, that necessary to create huge shapes everywhere. So you can just put pockets and stuff here and there. And then from there, just connect it, make sense of it all. And then I can like go in and fix all that, right? So focusing on the silhouettes, I have the small like antenna roof kind of structure stuff, some good foreground ones, right, to give me like a good amount of detail, but also like some of the more natural ones, right, like some of the cloud silhouettes, using that against light versus dark, right, against like the darker buildings, even against like darker clouds, right. Same thing like here, for example, right, dark over light, and just going around putting things in between, right. One, two, three, four, and then there's even that layer. So like within this there's like 5 different layers, and we're just kind of like building and expanding things, because if you don't, right, your images can kind of tend to end up pretty flat. Each shape is going to have its own perspective. It's going to have like its side plane, top plane, this and that, but you want to kind of make sure that every part of your scale kind of makes sense, right? from scale cues in the buildings, right? Like these shapes versus this shape versus these shapes, right? They're getting progressively smaller as they go back. There's a layering aspect where, like I was saying a second ago, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? There's like layering, there's a stacking of cards, as well as today, what we're going to be doing is finding the perspective within the shapes, right? Because this is a cube of sorts, right? So you get that depth there. This is already done. I'm going to fix that one in a second, right? This one has some dimension to it. This has dimension to it. And so now we're getting into more of like the physical objects perspective. Just through mostly graphic shapes alone, we have a semblance of distance, perspective, scale, and then we're getting clarity inside of our silhouettes. And then now, we just need to start actually addressing a lot of these pieces. So hopefully that makes sense. It's just a lot of rinse and repeat, right? It's something where I always start this way, regardless of how illustrated the paintings need to be, right? Something that happens a lot whenever we're students, or just, I guess, painting as a whole. There's this idea that you need to create things that are super painterly and super, illustrated, right? There's this like juicy brushstroke idea that we need to get to, which is, an ideal place to kind of be, right? For everybody learning how to paint, or, kind of going about their, like, I guess, illustration journey, right? Yes, there are some artists out there that paint extremely well, and they'll paint like super loose, and they'll kind of refine where they need, and then the whole image just kind of pops out of it. And there's some really good, interesting, like images done that way, right? But for those of you that are more normal, right? For those of you learning, for those of you, just kind of working on it, or not as illustrative, or whatever it is, start with clean edges first and then paint them down, right? It's a lot easier to be able to control your painterliness if you, start with a clean edge and then just throw some paint strokes on top, plant them where you want people to see it. It's not the most artistic way, you know what I mean? It's not like the most like pure illustration type of process. But if you don't have that eye to do it, generally speaking, you won't be able to anyway. So, use whatever skills you need, especially because we have Photoshop, right? Or whatever program you're using, you have layers to keep things separate. Keep it separate, keep it clean. At the end, flatten things down and then start like blending things, right? Like usually what I'll do, here, I'll just kind of show you. Boom. I just like flatten everything down, right? And I'll kind of have like and you've probably seen me do this a couple times, right? I'll just get like my soft brush or something, and then I'll just start blending some of these edges, right? You start losing some of that contrast where you don't want it, right? Oops, sorry. You just start kind of blending some of that out. You start kind of messing up some of this. You start like planting in brush strokes where we need it, right? It's, you can kind of do this a lot easier when you have, I guess, the control of a very clean, precise painting. It's really hard to do that just instinctively, right? If you're somebody that's trying to find that illustrative kind of touch, right? It just takes thousands of paintings to do that. But a lot of us haven't done thousands of paintings, and you don't want to wait until then. You just want to kind of get something out as soon as possible, right? So try this out, right? Work clean, go loose. Don't do the opposite way, because it takes a lot more skill to do it that way, right? I'm not saying don't aim for that. Just, it just, it's a lot harder. So, all right. So let's get into this. Today, what we're going to be doing is working on the interior shapes, right? There's a couple interior shapes already established, right? Because this is a pre-established painting, so it's like there is some things in there. I'm going to try to ignore some of it, or at least most of it in the background, and then the ship I'm probably going to expand upon. Like the ship looks cool. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just it could be better, right? So I'm going to kind of show you how I go about doing that, and some of the tricks and things that we can do to make that better, right? So let's go to my references. All right. Last week, I brought some photos, right? This is a photo pack, or not a photo pack. This is a reference folder that I use during summer class demos and stuff like that. If you've taken my class before, especially like World Building 2, you've seen this. And there were some photos like this, right? I did this exact one, right? I got this, I cut it out, and I started using it, right? And that's great. But then there's some others in there, right? As I was flicking through, you kind of see some of these, right? This one is in the same category as like this one, like just cleaner silhouettes, right? This one actually has a secondary effect too, where that cloud lighting is really strong. We'll get into that later, but yeah, I had other reasons for that. But then there's this one, right? It's not exactly a clean silhouette. Like, I mean, you can, but that's not why you would use this, right? This one, right? A little bit different as well. That one. This, textures, right? There is some clean silhouettes happening, but that's not why I want it. So, why do I have these photos in there? Some of these are my photos, right? Like some of these photos from Joshua Tree. Boom. Some of these are good. These are these warship ones are really good. But when I grab photos, there's a couple different categories I put it in, right? The first one being the silhouettes. I need the details. I need these small kind of like just nuanced things to kind of add to my silhouettes. The next thing I need is just interior shapes, right? Sometimes it's a rock, right? Hence why we have kind of more natural things. In this case, the painting is not going to have any rocks, so that's kind of irrelevant in this case. But there's also times where we have some hard surface things, right? So, we need panelings, we need windows, we need, more angled things, right? And this is a photo I like to use a lot, where we're just kind of using some of the various pieces of the ship, right? We're never using the full thing. And this is something I really want to hit home with everybody watching. Do not cut out a thing from a photo and just drop it into your painting, right? You don't want to do that. If it's not your photo, even if it is your photo, it's just lazy to begin with. Like when you own the photo, it's lazy, right? Which isn't good. And if you don't own the photo, it gets into this weird like kind of legal issue, right? So just don't even do that, and you'll probably be okay, right? But what I like to do is use the photos to help kind of kickstart me into whatever it is I need to do, right? Because there's a lot of detail here that allows me to kind of like build up noise and I guess a level of sophistication very quickly. And then all I have to do is actually just make sense of it all, right? So, for example, we're going to take this ship and then we're going to start doing things, right? So let me grab this. I'm going to drop it in here. And then I'm going to go back to my asset sheet. Where are you? Boom. Okay, so that's the piece I took last week, and as you can tell, I only made the one asset, right? I have the silhouettes from here, which I used a little bit of, right? But you really don't need that much. It's all you need is the detail of it, right? So I'm gonna put this on my second monitor. I'll show you in a second once I finish cutting stuff out. But I have this image here, and I don't really need like anything in particular. I just need like noise, right? A lot of this stuff is super helpful for that. When I'm seeing this image, right, I get like a lot of these recesses, these kind of darker panels, these kind of, like side panels, like this is a light, medium, dark, right? You just get volumes, right? And so what I'm going to do is start cutting things out and just have them set aside as Lego pieces. This is something that you've seen me do this before with assets, right? And now I'm just doing it with photos, and I'll show you how this applies to assets in a second. Let me take more of this actually. And don't really worry, like this is kind of where I don't really worry about the silhouette so much because I've already done the silhouette. I don't really care too much about the exterior shape, right? Because we've already established that. You don't have to get a perfect cut of it. You don't need a perfect cut, and you don't want a perfect cut of it because there's a temptation to just use that straight up. And something I want to kind of really caution people against is do not let the photos decide what shapes your buildings or designs need to be. The photos help you, but they do not dictate where the painting goes. that design is up to you. If you want something more, sci-fi, want something more modern, something more fantasy, it doesn't matter. The photo does not dictate that for you, right? I just want to keep that, just make sure that's clear, because there's a tendency when we're photo bashing that we'll use just pieces straight up, where it's like, as a sky, I'll drop it in as a sky. I need a building and drop in that whole building. You don't want to do that because it's lazy, and generally speaking, it's not really good design, right? So I took that piece, I brought it over here, right? Because now we're creating our like Lego piece set, essentially, right? We just have one piece that we're going to use. I'll add on to this as we go, but as I kind of show you how to do this, we'll kind of work on that. So, boom, what up? Boom, wait, shift S. There he goes. All right, so I'm gonna take this piece and I'm just gonna put it wherever I need it, right? So for example, I have a foreground here that has some detail to it, and I need some interior shapes to kind of go with that, right? So this is a technique called silhouette fill, right? And it's exactly that. You take your silhouette and you clip it, use it as a clipping mask to drop your photo inside, right? Pretty simple. You can kind of see how it's like, it's not exiting that silhouette that I've already made. And so right now it's a little bit bright, so I'm gonna kind of tone that down just a bit. And you can quickly see how I'm just creating detail that I didn't initially have. You know what I mean? So hopefully that makes sense. It's pretty simple, right? You're just kind of using some of the photos to kind of help you get somewhere. It's not done by any means. It's not even close. But this is the core of the technique here, is grab a photo, drop it in, see what happens, right? Because now there's some paneling here that I find more interesting, right? Because before, it's just this kind of black shape, right? There's a square that I cut the corner off of, and then I just started adding some detail on there, right? So from there, I now have two things. I have some interior shapes, and then I have some exterior shapes. And what I need to do now is combine all of those together and make it make sense, right? So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of take some time to kind of make this a little bit better, but this is where we're going. So hopefully this makes sense. I'll show you in a couple seconds how quickly you can kind of come to certain conclusions with this, where you can make designs really quickly using techniques like this, right? So I have like my image here, and what I want to do is just take the pieces that I need and then leave the ones I don't, right? So I like that panel right there. I'm just going to expand that, and I'm going to kind of carry it down a little bit further, right? Pretty simple. Something like that. Clip that back in. Oops. And you can even, like, every time you cut out a photo, right, bring it back into your asset sheet, right? So do that, boom, right? So that's three pieces. And I don't sit down and like cut things out. Just, you can. It works that way. I used to do things that way. What I found that it kind of wastes time, right? A lot of times it's like you're kind of like cutting out photos that you don't necessarily need, you know what I mean? And so it just kind of becomes you use like maybe a couple pieces, but generally speaking, 80% of it isn't used, so it kind of becomes just a waste, right? So I just like to cut out as I need. In the beginning, it's a little bit slower, but towards the end, you kind of run into this rhythm of like constantly, or I guess being able to just use the pieces that you have, right? And so within a couple seconds, you kind of start seeing like this ledge build up, right? Obviously, there's a lot to kind of do here, but this is something where I had nothing, and within a couple seconds, I have something highly detailed, and then all I have to do is just maintain that at this point, right? I take this, and then now, I have my grid on, and I can just start, drawing stuff, make it make sense. Go in there, design what you need, and then, you kind of just rolling from there, right? Pretty simple. No one's ever going to be able to tell like what photo you used where from, right? It's not, and on top of that, you're using it in a radically different way. I used the bottom of a boat, right, to make the ridge of a building, right? It's, it's not even related in any kind of way. But it looks correct for what I'm going for. And then from here, right, we can kind of start doing things. We can just start making this make sense, start, you know, adding details and cleaning it up, right? And what this does for me is this allows me to, I guess, design without having to think through it the whole time, right? That sounds funny, but like, I'm me personally as an artist, I'm really, I won't say bad at it, but like, I'm really not that good at just designing from scratch, right? There's artists that can do it really well. And like, if I'm looking at a blank page, it's super hard for me. I don't know what, like, and maybe it's just I need to do more imagination sketching and this and that, right? I get that. But more often than not, right, I design this way. I let the randomness kind of inspire me, and then I just dive in. It's kind of like when you look at the clouds, right? It's like, oh, I see this thing or see that thing, right? What I'm doing is I'm trying to use randomness to get me in the right ballpark, and then I let my understanding of design kind of take over from there, right? Um, there's a program that we used in school. It's called Alchemy. For those that have used something like it, it was like this. Heavy paint kind of has something like it where you use the lasso tool. When you like let go, it kind of like fills in that lasso, and you can like make weird shapes really quickly. And like I really liked that tool because when I was in school, I was really like bad at just designing as a whole. But when I saw something, I learned how to fix things. Okay, you know what I mean? Like I was able to kind of make adjustments as necessary, but I was really bad at like just coming it off from the top of my head, right? And to be honest, like still to this day, I'm not very like if I see a blank page, right, I can't just sketch things very easily, right? I don't know, I'm just not that good at it. But when I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I can work with it, right? And that's what I'm doing here. I'm just allowing myself to see what's in the clouds, see the randomness, and apply my design theory to it, right? And using photos, using details and stuff like that can kind of help me get there a bit quicker, right? And so quickly, you can see a couple different things. For one, you start seeing a design that you didn't already have, right? You see like some breakups, you see like various small panel lines, and then I'm just kind of continuing that thought as I go work through this image, right? I'm just kind of continuing on that ledge, painting at whatever angle I need to paint at to make that feel like it's a metal panel. But then there's like the weathering on it, there's like discoloration, there's all sorts of stuff, and all that detail gets built in for you, all within one photo, right? And it's a super useful technique, and to be honest, this carried my career for a long time, just because it's so easy to do it. And then the designs, there's not a consistency to the design, right? Like, it's really hard to like just make this consistent, but generally speaking, I'll almost always come out with something. I don't know what it's going to be all the time, but as long as you're using the right photos, you're using the right design understanding, you can use this to kind of help you get to a conclusion just a little bit faster, right? So hopefully this makes sense. At this point, right, we're going to start kind of getting into like just rinse and repeat mode, and then just talking about other things. But this is the core of the technique of what today is about. Last week, right, really understanding how do we apply and fix our silhouettes. How do we do things to make our just general shapes look better and make our image just have a little more depth, right? Now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make this whole building make a lot more sense, and I'm zooming in, right? I'm at 200% right now. I recommend getting even closer than that, and then just start painting. I'm just like, oh, I need a box right here, I need something to kind of make this feel like whatever, right? You just get in there and just start cleaning shit up. It's as simple as that. Cool. If there's any questions at all on this or on anything, just let me know. We can talk about it at this point. We're kind of in that the question zone at this point. I do have something I do want to talk about in light of like some things that's been going on in the industry, but we'll talk about that later. Well, we'll get to like actual questions first. If there's anything you guys want to talk about, can't talk about the juicy stuff yet. It's too early for that. All right, boom, clip that in. What I like doing as well, you can set this on lighter color, right? And that way you don't really get your shadows as much, and you can like duplicate this, move it around, warp it, do what you need to do to make this look more and more interesting, right? I'll flip that horizontal, boom. Then do stuff like that. It's like, wow, you designed all that? I'm like, yeah, dude, that's what I do. That's why you pay me the big bucks. Damn, dude, look at that. Got a nice cool ledge happening. Let's see. Using masks, right? Using my mask to kind of like clear out some of the spots that I don't want. Oops, some stuff like this. And then pow. Look at that. Cool. Turn off my grid so you can see that a bit better. And now it's like you just have, you know, a ledge, right? We're gonna make this more interesting and better. But really quickly, not a lot of effort and a whole bunch of noise and detail, right? A whole bunch of just useful things to make this this whole image just work just a little bit better. Let's try. That's fine for now. Cool. First shape, right? Getting closer. So I'm gonna continue that. I'm gonna go into other buildings. I might continue this one for a little bit longer, but I'm gonna start getting into like other buildings, other shapes, and stuff like that, just to kind of get this get the same kind of level for everything around as well, right? And also like think about like repeating shapes. You know, if you see shapes that are like, because before when we did the silhouettes, we didn't really quite know exactly where we were going, right? Which is fine because we didn't, you know, we're just creating complexity and detail, right? But now that you actually have some of those interior shapes already being established, right? Use this opportunity to help the image make sense, right? Duplicate things, reference things, use whatever skill necessary to make this image come across as a consistent building rather than like, you know, just I guess letting the details just kind of stand, right? Just, you know, it never looks good if you just leave it alone. You actually have to do something with it. Cool. Interesting. Let's see. What else we got here? Nice, nice. Cool. Dang, what's up, people? There's like 10 people here. How's it going?
Hey Kenny, how you doing?
Yo, what's up, dude? How's life, Michi?
Oh, hot in here. I'm experienced the US heat and it's quite intense, more than Canada.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, that's the thing. What part of Canada were you
Humidity
from
is
again?
horrible. Oh, I was kind of like close to BC, honestly, Vancouver.
Ah,
But it
okay.
was mostly around Banff,
Ah, gotcha,
the
gotcha.
mountains.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Really nice and cool and dry.
Yeah. It you're what? Are you in LA right now or?
No, I'm in the Midwest-ish area.
Oh, Midwest.
Just
Gotcha.
kind of traveling around. Yeah, I will go to LA for Lightbox, but where are you at the moment, by the way? Can you feel like in the middle or Tokyo-ish area?
I'm in the middle, so I'm right above
Oh,
Nagoya, where I'm in Gifu City, and so that's near Kyoto, Osaka, but towards the middle.
oh, nice. I got
Yeah.
family nearby there.
Oh, do you have family nearby there? Oh, sick.
Oh, and half Japanese, half Mexican, so
Oh, dude. Damn, man, that's sick.
yeah, French, French born.
French born?
Yeah, my parents made in France.
Oh, shit. Damn, dude, you're
Yeah,
a little bit of everything. Nice. That's cool, man.
yeah, Canadian, everything. Yeah. Oh yeah, I had a question. I did drop it in the chat, but maybe you didn't see it. I was wondering, what do you do when you have a let's say an art director gives you an image that he just found online. It's like, oh, just use this image, put it here. Would you work on something around it to modify it so you don't get into muddy territory, or you just use as it is, like your art director would tell you?
That's a tough one. It depends on
Yeah.
what they're giving you, right? If they're giving you like, okay, for example, let's say you're working for Call of Duty and it's something realistic where it's like it needs to be this thing, right? Generally speaking, you're gonna be a little more okay. Even then, I try to make like 10% changes, at the very least, because it you have to really know what it is, right? Because let's say, for example, they're like, I don't know, there's like you needed to put in this vehicle or something, and they wanted this exact vehicle, right? But the exact vehicle you have is kind of off in terms of like the storytelling element, where it's like, oh, it's not the exact car, it's just another model of type of thing, right? That's where you want to be careful, where you need to know like what's happening in your story, and so on and so forth, to make all that make sense. You can't just throw something in just to use it. You have to do it in a logical way, right? So that's the first thing. Really make sure that you understand like what your project is even trying to do. Because for example, like on Blue Eye, a lot of the Japanese culture references, right? They are real, right? There's a realism to it where it's not exactly made up. We're just referencing things from like Edo Japan or whatever, but there are some design things that need to change because of the circumstances that we're kind of like using for our story, right? So when I get a design, I have to make some adjustments to it and change it to kind of fit that narrative a bit better. That's really as far as I'll go in terms of like almost a one for one drop in, where it's like I need this temple, but we'll kind of change some of the wood, we'll change some of the symbolism, we'll change some of the arrangement of things to kind of match our narrative a bit better. And that's fine, generally speaking. But if you're designing something and they're like, oh hey, we want like this ship, right? Where it's like, let's say you need to design some sort of dragonfly helicopter thing, and your art director's like, oh, take the ornithopter and throw it in there. Generally speaking, 99.9% of the time, it's don't cut it out and throw it in. It's make something like that, reference that heavily, but make your own version of it, make a variation essentially, right? Most good art directors won't make you do that, right? Just because for one, they know better, so that just won't happen. But there are times where like a client will make you do that, right? Where it's like, hey, we really like this ship from Star Wars. Can you just throw this in there? And they don't. Sometimes the client just doesn't understand that they can't do that. Like, because they're not like versed in what we do essentially. So what you want to do is give them a version where it's like that, right? It has the same kind of vibe, has the same kind of tones, because they're responding to it pretty well, right? There's something about that ship that they want. They don't necessarily need the exact formation and the exact panel lines. They just need something that's like kind of close. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It's a weird line. I think something that for everybody, right? As you're like kind of going through your career, right? Going through like, you know, just working with clients, working with art directors, something that you want to really try to learn how to do is take what they mean, not what they say, right? Because, like for example, for I don't know how many of you have worked with clients and had this experience. I'd venture to say a lot of you have. A lot of you that have working experience have. There's this time when you'll get an assignment from your art director or whoever, and then they go, okay, hey, take this and this, put it together, right? And that's what you do, right? You take their references and you do like almost a one for one. Like you do the correct thing where it's like you take it and adjust it as necessary, right? That's totally legit, right? But there's this crit, this it sounds crazy when you actually hear it, but it's always like, you did exactly what we told you, but it's not what we want. It's like, it's like, it's not like, it's like we want just that little bit more. It's like you gave us exactly what we asked for, or it's like, this isn't it, and you're thinking, that's the fucking thing. You know what I mean? I gave you what you asked for. But you gave them literally what they asked for, but not what they meant, right? And there's a big difference to that. Oftentimes, your leads, your especially clients, art directors a lot less so, but clients and stuff do this a lot, where they don't know art like we do, because why would they, right? We're the professionals in this case, so they're technically speaking, coming to us for advice, right? And what you want to do is understand what the goal is, because sometimes they can't foresee some of the problems that will pop up. They can't foresee some of the issues that are going to be, associated with whatever design that they're kind of asking for. And so you want to understand what that goal is, right? For those of you like ever having trouble like designing for clients, right? If you ever like, especially in the beginning, it's always like, I don't know what this art director wants. They're so picky, this and that, there's always that there's always that complaint of like, my art director doesn't know what he wants. Or there's always like, my leads just kind of shoot down all my ideas, right? A big thing that helps is understanding what they need, right? Like, why do they need this thing? It's like, what kind of things are you designing to make that end result happen? They're like, hey, we need a ship. And you're like, cool. And you made like a boat, it's watercraft. It looks amazing. It's the coolest boat you've ever made. And then when they said ship, they meant airship, because they needed something flying because in the scene, like if you look at the storyboards, there's a ship that's kind of, flying in and drops down or whatever, right? That's the whole story point. But you didn't know that because you don't work with a story team. You just heard, I need a ship. And so you designed what they asked for. But, obviously this is a very specific and easy example to kind of avoid, but it happens all the time. Maybe, they're not quite conveying what they need as well, or you're not quite looking for what they're kind of needing. You know what I mean? Like, you're not really trying to analyze like, why are they asking for that? What do they need this for? You want to ask that every single time. Every time you do something, right? You don't have to ask it to them specifically, but you want to at least ask for yourself. Be like, hey, why am I doing this painting? What is this painting for? Because if you know what it's for, you'll be able to kind of design your thing, whatever it is, with a little bit more accuracy, right? It just makes that process a little bit easier. You know what I'm saying? So that's really like a big thing that kind of helped me kind of get my designs approved a lot quicker. Because more often than not, to be completely honest, most art directors, they don't give a shit about like the cut lines or, like the small things, right? They're like, oh, this panel's in the wrong spot. Let's move that. It's like they don't give a shit about that, dude. Because the whole thing is, it's a carrier. They need this thing to be flying across the thing, and they just leave all that alone most of the time. Obviously, there's some art directors out there that are pretty anal about those things, but generally speaking, you'll probably be okay with the general vibe, right? You want to understand what they need from it, not just what like they're kind of giving you. You know what I'm saying? So it's a tough balance to kind of find that, I feel, but once you understand it, working with clients becomes so much easier. You literally go from like getting 1 out of 10 things approved to like 9 out of 10 things approved, just because because they don't care. They don't more often than not, they don't care, just because they're like, yeah, it fits, it does what it needs to do, and they'll trust you more. They'll be like, okay, cool, they know what I need. I need this ship to fly, I need this ship to hold 2 passengers, I need this thing to do whatever, and then you give them the rest of the details. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, yeah, quite a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Really helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Let me up the level on this one. what if you gotta work on something that is an existing IP, but you don't really like, let's say in theme parks specifically, where you gotta work on an IP that exists and you gotta just grab an image from the show and stuff.
Like, yeah, you're they're gonna give you like, you know, let's say you're working on God of War or something, and they're like, hey, grab this, put it in there.
Yeah, kind of thing.
I mean, it depends on who owns it, right? If it's like a God of War
Yeah.
thing, like for example, like I'll take paintings from my teammates or from my art director and literally throw it in my painting because it's an asset from the show, from the product. You know what I mean? Like it's fine. We own it. It's not a big deal. A lot of the like just taking of images and stuff, right? That only applies when you don't own it. But when when the show owns it, it's fine, generally speaking. You know what I mean? Like it's okay. Like when we would do for example, we would do like Disney stuff where we're working on the Imagineering stuff for Disney, right? You can take, you know, actual like Avengers things and put it in the scene because that's what that's what it is. They're trying to reference that IP. It's a lot more okay versus like if I try to take the Quinjet from Avengers and put it in here, it's a whole other painting. It's not even related. So now you're just taking designs versus keeping consistency in your world, you know? So you just need to be aware of that. Generally speaking, right? If an art director tells you to throw it in, they already understand what is necessary, right? Where it's like they've already gone through the legal ideas of like, oh yeah, you know, take this thing, throw it in there. Like they know it worked because they wouldn't say it like that if it was like, you know, like something that could lead to legal problems. You know what I'm saying? Generally speaking, I don't want to say that for like everybody, but you know, most of the time it's fine. It's just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I always wonder about that side of things because every time an art director tells you, it almost feels like you got the get go to just do the thing, especially when they have worked with that IP. So I was always curious, is that okay, or is that just we just follow them blindly kind of thing? So
You know,
that's
man,
just one
it's
decision.
it's funny, dude. Like, I think the the student, I guess, world is so different than the professional world, right? For example, there are times. Okay, so for example, in class, I'm like design everything, you know, make the thing. Even like taking notes. Like for example, like I'll give people notes on their paintings. Generally speaking, what I mean is take the general vibe of what I'm telling you and apply it to your image, right? Because, you know, you don't want to just literally take my paint over, put it into your painting, and then paint on top, right? That's not how we want to do it in class, right? In a class setting, I just want to be super clear about this. In a class setting, you do not want to take the paint over you got from your teacher or whoever, put it into your painting, and then paint over. That's not how you want to do it because it's not how you're going to learn. You know, a lot of the decisions have been made at that point. All you have to do is clean it up, right? That's the wrong way to approach it. But in a professional setting, that happens almost every single assignment. I will say, generally speaking, every single assignment that I do where I get a paint over or something, I'm matching that one for one, right? Because it's different now, right? Because the setting in school was always, oh yeah, I need you to learn how to do this, right? Like, hey, you know, make this painting better. This is how you make it better, right? Because usually, if you're in class, you know, there's a lack of skill, so you're trying to build your skill essentially. In a work setting, nobody is trying to progress in. Not, I don't want to say the primary goal of a production is not increasing skill, it's getting out the product, right? So if the art director already did the painting for you, right, already did some of the adjustments, you can throw that in, paint on top, call it a day, right? That's why we're a team. That's why, generally speaking, I don't know very many productions that would frown on that, right? Because why would they even give you the paint over if you're not supposed to use it, kind of thing, right? Like with my artists, what we'll do is like, I'll give you the paint over and just use it, just use my layers, right? And then go from there. That's kind of how we go about things. There are, I don't know, there could be some lines in some productions, but almost every production I've been on, it's just teamwork, right? It's the art director gave you notes and you apply it one for one, because we're not always looking for I guess a different solution to things. We just need the exact solution that they just gave you, and it's just a waste of time to like have to redo that. You know what I mean? It's more productive to just say, take this, move forward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of brings light to a lot of things I have in mind too, where I get conflicting advice all the time, where it's like, oh no, it's fine, your job, but when you're studying, it always tells you, oh no, don't do that. You're not learning, but it's like, well, I'm not supposed to learn the job sometimes. So
Yeah, the goal.
it's kind of nice to hear that.
You got to know what the goal is, right? The goal is to make, like in production, the goal is to make a product. That is the number one thing. We're trying to use our artists and things to make the thing that needs to be made, right? Whether it's the levels, the design, or whatever. Because oftentimes, like, and I've said this a couple times here, where I'm like, oh yeah, you're not the only one that's going to work on your painting, because it's not really your painting. It is, you're doing it, but the production owns the painting. You're not the owner of this. You can't just sell it. You can't do whatever, right? Generally speaking, it's a team effort, right? And even then, when you put when you like show the work, you can't take full credit, or you're not supposed to, right? You're supposed to say, oh yeah, this is the painting I did for this, and then this was my art director, this is my production designer, this is who helped me on the painting, this is, you know what I mean? It's like, you want to give credit where it's due. So generally speaking, you're not really the only one working on your painting, and so the goal here isn't skill building, right? Because we're trying to make a game, man. We don't really care. I don't really care about trying to get you better at painting. I just needed this design done. But in school, yeah, I need you to get better. So it's not really effective if you just take my painting and use it, because it doesn't help you get to your goal. It just shows you where you went wrong. But then I kind of like I kind of got rid of the practice that would have been helpful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Yeah, great questions. A lot of these things, like, we don't really know that, right? Because, like, why would you? A lot of, there's just a lot of times where we'll do, things in class. They're done a certain way, right? Especially even like, even paintings like this, where I'm like artificially holding myself back as I do the painting. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing this painting, and I'm doing it in a way that I wouldn't normally do, because I'm doing it week by week. I'm trying to show you step by step on how I do this. In practice, I'm doing every step at once. I'm cleaning the silhouettes, I'm adding the details, I'm, painting the interior shapes and various things like that. And, we're just kind of working through the whole thing at one speed. But in a school setting, in a learning setting, I do things slower. I do things kind of like, broken up, because it helps people understand things better, right? And in class, there's things that we'll do that it's not necessarily the same, right? I talk about this in my world building 2 classes a lot, or even like some of my mentorships. I'm artificially holding you back, but in a real life setting, it's different, right? And you just kind of have to understand that, and just rely on these skills to kind of get you to where you're going, right? So that's the main idea, right? Generally speaking, there's you have to know what the goal is, right? The goal in a student setting is learn. The goal in a professional setting is get a product, right? 2 very different goals, and your ability within that is what's going to kind of get you to get approvals faster and just get through the job a little bit easier, right? Because we'll go into this setting, like we'll go into this job setting with a student mentality, and it just makes things harder, because you're like, oh, I was taught in school to do this. It's like, yeah, but you're not in school anymore, so why are you doing it that way? So that be the reason. Cool. All right, let's see. Any other questions? That was a great question. Thanks, Michi. You got the best questions.
You got the best answers.
Thanks, man. I get kind of it's funny, I like kind of space out sometimes. I'm like, wait, did I repeat that? Did I say that? So I'm sorry for everybody. Like, if I get repetitive, I mean, we're like fucking 20 episodes in at this point, so you already know this about me. But for those that are new, if I get repetitive, I am sorry. But I'm like doing like.
No,
I have
repetition.
a. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go for it, man.
I got a question. So, in terms of like photo bashing detail onto stuff, right?
Yep.
With like clipping masks. What do you do? I know this works for like, and maybe this works even for the snare I'm thinking of, but so you were working on IP where they're really picky about like the form language and like the detail, right? Maybe you have some kind of like really weird, kind of like greebles, right? Like imagine Star Wars, except maybe there's not a Star Wars yet, right? And you have to do something with like a really weird specific style of detail. Do you like make your own sheet of details to bash in? Do you just use real world stuff and kind of not worry about it and then try to add more flavor later? Or what do you do in those situations where it's kind of like really, you're doing it essentially like non-existent architecture or something that's really weird like that?
Yeah. So right, there's a couple different ways to do that. There's a couple different mentalities. I use all of it all at once, right? The main thing being, okay, if you need to create a whole new world, right, and a form language that makes sense for your world, the biggest thing really is that you have to understand what the language is, right? Like, if you don't understand what you're looking at, how are you going to repeat it? And that's where, surprise, guys, what I was talking about with the form language set class, right? The live streams from what was it, June, right? Form language. It's you like really break down what you have, right? You have to look at this and be like, oh yeah, I know what piece I'm using and why, because that's what creates consistency. If you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't know how to replicate it or what the formula is made of, right? You know, how are you gonna create that again, right? It's like baking a cake. If you don't know the recipe, how are you gonna make the same cake again? And so when I'm doing this, I'm very, very conscious of like what things I'm like adding into my scene, how I'm adding it, you know, and so on and so forth, because it's a formula, right? It just I need this to make sense. I need to build this again. That's the first thing. The core foundation of it is understand what the form language is. That comes from good design skills and just general just consciousness when you're actually designing, right? A lot of us will design where it's like, oh, I just kind of made something and, you know, just turned out that way, you know? That's bad. I don't want to say it's bad, but it's like, it's very bad. Like it's not a good approach if you're trying to be a good concept artist. If you are a good concept artist, you are not relying on randomness or I guess habits to make your decisions, right? Because it only works for whenever things are kind of within your wheelhouse, right? Like if it's something that's like, oh, I see you're a hard surface person. You really like your hard surface design. Yeah. It's like, it's only when you can do that stuff, right? But to be an actual like good designer, what you want to do is really be able to break down what the language is, right? Understand like, okay, this language is made up of these things. This is how we apply it. Because you got to make other things in the scene like that, right? Because, you know, there's other things. And so the basics, right? Just form language, how do you apply it? What pieces go where? And you're probably going to be okay. That's the first thing. Next thing is use the same photos, use the same textures, right? So like whenever I'm painting, for example, like, you know, I just made 2 buildings here, right? But hold up. Let me drag this to the top. All right, cool. I made 2 buildings here, right? This building to the left and this building to the right. Okay. I had zero intention of making them the same building, right? Because it's not the same building. They're 2 different buildings. But I used the same photo, right? It's the same like back of a carrier, right? It's the one photo I cut out. I can cut out more and, you know, do that. But it's the one photo I cut out. And just naturally, just because I used the same photo, it has the same form language, the buildings look like they're related, right? I didn't intend on doing that. It just happened, right? And it's not that I was trying not to do that. I obviously there's a reason I did it. I allowed it to happen, but I used the same pieces to make up the same general idea. It's a variation of, right? If you use the same ingredients, you're gonna come out with, generally speaking, a similar meal, right? It might not be exactly the same, but it's gonna feel very similar, right? If you have steak, potatoes, and like broccoli, there's only a handful of ways that can actually come out to be, you know, a another recipe. You know what I'm saying? Like you can cut it differently, you can like mix it differently, you can cook it differently. Generally speaking, though, it's the same ingredients, so there's gonna be a similarity between all of them, right? Same thing here. I use the same Lego pieces. I use the same photos. That helps a lot because it kind of allows me to not think about my forms so much, right? Like whenever I'm using my, I guess, making buildings and going around and doing things, it allows me to just think about like general shape design instead of like, I guess, the consistency between things, right? It's a lot easier. And then the last thing is this, because this only works if I have, if I'm making something up from scratch where I'm like, using a photo or whatever. Like in this painting, for example, it's fine. If I had to do something for Star Wars, this design language might not work, right? It might in some instances, but generally speaking, it probably wouldn't. And so, from here, you can then start using your own paintings to help make that happen, right? So, for example, like what I did this past month, right, with the architecture building one, the house, right, or the coffee shop. For July's live stream, I was using assets from like way back when I was doing live streams on Twitch. Right, for those of you that don't remember, it was the windmill one, right? And I made like some bushes, I made some clouds, I made some trees and stuff. And I, because it's just the way I naturally paint, or just like my kind of default not thinking about painting, right? There's a consistency between that. And then I used those pieces. I literally grabbed from existing paintings, like my own paintings, and just threw them together and then painted them up. And that's how I actually do things at work too. If I needed to create another view of this, or another city view, right? Like another place, right? What I would do is just take this exact painting, take those exact clouds, take this exact ship, and just start using pieces of it to make my next painting, right? I'm not building it from scratch every single time. I'm using things to kind of ground me and keep me consistent, if that makes sense. So a couple different things there. Really, the main thing is understand form language fundamentals. That's going to get you the furthest because, using all the other techniques, it doesn't even matter if you don't know how to keep things kind of consistent. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know what the formula is, it's really hard to repeat the formula, right? That's the main thing. After that, there's a lot of tricks, a lot of like just techniques you can use to help you get through things easier. But yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. Great question. I had a question in the thing. Finn Down says, any advice for breaking down the form language? A couple different things, right? Like if you are trying to break down the form language, you want to look at, for one, just the main shapes, right? For example, when you look at like Tatooine, right? Like let's look at it. Let's bring it up. Where is that? Tatooine images. All right, here you go. Okay, so let's look at this one. Copy image. Yeah, sure. Create V. There you go. Okay, so I'm looking at this image here, right? And let's say I need to make another, they're like, oh, this building's really cool. We need one more right here. Whatever. I don't know. Right? They're like, hey, make a new building. Cool. Let me start with a square. It's like, no, man. Like everything is a dome or a cylinder. Yes, there's buildings here that are more square than others, but the majority of it is very domed and cylindrical, right? All this back here, right? There's a couple squares, the main silhouettes being domes, right? Break this thing down into the most basic primitive shapes that you can find. right? Look at it and be like, okay, I see a lot of circles, a lot of, spheres. I see a lot of cylinders, a lot of round shapes, and a lot of like randomness, right? The organization method. It's not exactly like a city block where there's buildings, perfectly lined up next to each other. It looks like they're kind of just built wherever they're built, right? Like they just they need a building here, they just put a building up, right? And so that's the first thing. Identifying exactly what you see is the shapes. And then try to see if you can find cultures or things in real life that match kind of what they're doing. Because this is what happens in design. What they're really doing is they're not just like sitting there and making this from pure imagination. You know what I mean? Just like straight up, like just big brained it and just, a building popped out, right? No, they got a bunch of references, they put it all together and made a thing, right? It's like, I don't know, whatever architecture this is, mixed with another thing, mixed with another idea. And then you find that you break down what that formula is. You know what I mean? It's just trying to understand what pieces make this up. Because, like I was saying earlier with Hunter's question, it's, when I'm trying to create consistency in my paintings, I'm using pieces to kind of make it all like come together, right? I'm using the same Lego pieces to kind of piece this whole thing together. So what you need to do is find out what those Lego pieces are, or at least something kind of close. It doesn't need to be exact, unless you're working on the exact project. If I'm working on Star Wars, right? It needs to be exact. But in that case, they'll give me what the references are, right? My art directors, my leads, or whoever is going to give you the exact references they used. But if you're just doing this for like student work or doing this for whatever, generally speaking, you can get away with something that's kind of close, right? And after that, you're probably gonna be okay, So hopefully that helps. But yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, for sure, dude. Great questions, guys. See, this is why we ask questions. I think something I really want to talk about too is like I really try to make this very question focused, right? And it probably gets annoying every week where I'm like, hey guys, what do you want to ask, right? Because the reason we do that is because there's only so many issues that I run into in a day, right? Like for example, there's things that'll pop up during the week, and I talk about that all the time, right? Where I'm like, hey, I was talking to this person doing this thing, and I have another topic as well that I want to talk about. But the reason that I like talking about these things is because the people that are asking, generally speaking, it's the exact issue they're running into. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if I don't know what assignment Michi's on. I don't know what Hunter's doing. I don't know what Finn's doing. Chances are it's something to do with form language, has something to do with like, these things. It's something like their question is usually a direct thing associated with a problem they're currently having or a problem that they had recently, right? And so when we talk about these things, these are problems that people of your level are experiencing. You know what I mean? Because when I talk about my problems, it's not that I'm like super high level or anything, but generally speaking, we're not at the same like spot in our career. You know what I mean? I'm, almost 10 years into this at this point. So the problems that I'm having are problems that, somebody more entry level will have in 10 years, but you won't remember that. And it's very unrelatable, right? So like if you have questions, right, ask them, because chances are these are questions that people that are roughly in your skill level, right, people that are kind of in the same general ballpark, it's the same problems that they're having. You know what I mean? They might not know it yet, but it is something that it can help kind of create more relatability, right? I think something that I really enjoyed in classes was like feedback sessions. I didn't really care about demos that much when I was in school. And the main reason being, you see somebody paint, like I'd see like John or somebody paint, right? And you look at the painting and then, he just does the magic. And then, we go off and do our thing. And then you go home and realize you're just trash, right? It's not that it's, you can watch the demo, but you just don't have the fundamentals that he has. You know what I mean? Like that's what happened a lot. Like, for example, the mixer brush was like really popping off when I was in school. That and like a couple other things, but like the mixer brush was really popping off. And he did a whole class on it. He did a whole thing. And then, we tried it. The students of the time, right, tried it. And then, like, really, generally speaking, we just came to the conclusion that we suck at painting. You know what I mean? It really had nothing to do with like the mixer brush at all. It's just our fundamentals were not good. My values weren't good. My color theory wasn't good. And so when I tried it, like I did I did the moves he did. I took this painting, smudged it out, used it as a thing, whatever, and it didn't turn out the same. I was like, so I just suck, right? That's the conclusion that we're going to jump to, right? Which is true, right? It's, you're just not quite ready for that information yet. But there are times where I'd be in a class and the teacher would do a paint over session in class where I'm just watching, and it doesn't even have to be my painting. It's just somebody else's painting, right? And they're kind of fixing problems that this person ran into, right? Like if I give you a paint over, right, I'm like fixing, I was like, oh yeah, check your value structure, check this, check that, right? And that was so helpful because you're literally watching somebody that has the same problem you do, but now we're just learning how to fix that problem. You know what I mean? It's so helpful to like have people of your level kind of mess up with you because, you might not have messed up at that point, but you probably would have ran into it if you were doing whatever they were doing. You know what I mean? Like it's the same, generally speaking, we all have the same issues at the same level, right? Just because, we're all the same level, right? And so things like that are super helpful for those of you kind of wondering and like, I guess maybe nervous to ask questions. Let's put it that way. Just remember, like everybody's kind of experiencing the same thing. If you're having issues, chances are somebody else in your friend circle is having issues too. And so, don't be afraid to ask. I'm not going to attack you or anything. At least I don't think I will. Just ask it. Don't be afraid. And then chances are it helps others as well, right? I think that's the biggest thing too. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about asking that. I didn't even realize that I should be thinking about that. So a lot of helpful stuff happens when people are like just kind of participating and like engaged, right? Because that's what we're really needing. It's just like just relevant questions, relevant problems, because we all have the same issues. Cool. But yeah. Nice. All right. So we're getting through this. It's funny too, because like looking at this, like within like 2 foreground pieces, the painting is actually looking a lot more finished than it was, right? The left building has a pretty high amount of detail to it. It's not like super done or anything, but it feels finished. When you zoom out like this, it's like it's pretty close. And I'm just gonna it's just a lot of rinse and repeat. Take these shapes, take these ideas, bring it in, right? You can even take like other pieces, like take your painting, right? The painting that you just did and apply it into the other thing that you need to do, right? So for example, like this building right there, I'm gonna take that building, clip that in, boom, flip that horizontal, do what I need to do to it. Dude, easy money, dude, easy. Let's go, man. Check it. And then like you just make that make sense afterwards, And then they go, dude, you designed all this from scratch? And you tell them, that's why you pay me the big bucks. All right, let's see, boom. Let's kind of finish this piece right there. I like that.
Have you ever told a art director that's why you pay me the big bucks actually?
Oh, dude, I do that all the time, man. They're like, hey, can you do this? Can you do whatever? It's like, man, that was fast. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's why you pay me the big bucks, Like I'm not kidding. Like I'll like it's not like talking shit or anything, but you're just I mean, generally speaking, your art directors they're cool people, and just joking around, keeping it light. Obviously, if they're pissed off or whatever about something, yeah, you might want to chill out with that. But it's I won't say it to a client because you don't know clients like that. But art directors, you see them, I don't know, like what 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. If your workplace has a healthy work schedule, you know, the unhealthy places you see them even more than that, you know. So, but you know, it is what it is. I like to keep it lively, you know.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's funny too, because like I'll say that's why you pay me the big bucks, knowing damn well that they make way more than I do. The art directors, they're making like, you know, whatever, like twice, if not more, what a normal concept artist makes. So, you know, they get the joke. They know what it's about. All right. Cool. Let's see. Boom, right? Buildings being finished left and right. Half of it, like I think I don't know when I started this building or started the actual painting process, but within an hour, right? You already have the main kind of 3 buildings done. There's another building right in the front, in between the foreground and that midground one I just did. I need to do that one, and then I need to do the main kind of tall one in the back. Once I get that, everything's gonna be pretty smooth sailing at that point. But you can see how, like, you know, we're just, you know, making stuff, and it's kind of like when you do variations, you know, like when you do one building design and you're like, oh cool, let's make another version, right? And then, you know, you can take that old building and then like stretch it out, do your thing, paint over it, right? That's exactly what I'm doing here. These 3 buildings are just variations of the same idea. And the cool part about architecture is if one building looks like that, generally speaking, the other buildings probably look very similar, right? Because it's the same fucking place, right? It's the same city. You know, there are times, right, where you need a different looking building, right, where you need something to stand out, absolutely. But you're, at the very least, the base level, it's gonna look okay if you know, use the same pieces. So cool. Let's start killing this. Boom. Let's see. Let's turn that off for a second. All right. I did have something I wanted to talk about. If there's no more questions, I can jump into that. But I had this comment from one of my mentorships this past week, and I just wanted to talk about everybody else because everyone else is probably feeling the same way. To be completely honest, what he said was. Especially with like the layoffs recently, right? Obviously, for those that don't know, there's been more layoffs, right? Surprise, there's always layoffs, you know, because our industry be like that. But there, you know, it's right now in particular, it can be very discouraging when you're online because, you know, a lot of people, there's this, you know, when you see, you know, on Instagram or whoever, they'll be like, oh, you know, so and so looking for work, you know, contact this, right? And, you know, which is great, you know, share that, do whatever, right? But it can be discouraging sometimes because you're like, wait, that person's having trouble finding work? What chance do I have? You know, because this person's like a 10-year veteran or it's been you know, this person worked on this thing, you know what I mean? Like it's this huge like artist that like you wouldn't think would be having a hard time finding work, right? And so it's like, you know, what chance do you have? What chance do me, a junior artist, or even a student, have at finding work if this legendary artist or this great artist can't find work or is having trouble finding work, right? It's super discouraging because, you know, it just makes it really puts into perspective what's actually happening, right? A lot of the, I guess, industry things that are going on, right? That's I would say I don't want to say that's the conclusion that a lot of us would jump to, right? It's logical, it makes sense, but what I said was I wouldn't think of things that way, right? Yes, there's a logic to it, right? There's something where you know, yes, you can think of things like that, which, and I don't fault anybody for thinking like that because that's very true, right? Because, you know, if you think about it in terms of like, you know, you're applying to a job, right? And you see fucking Craig Mullins applying to the same job, fucking, you know what I mean? I'm gonna probably keep looking, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not that I'm like losing hope, but I'm like, I mean, it's Craig motherfucking Mullins. You know what I mean? Like, come on. But what I'd highly recommend everybody think about is what makes you special, right? What makes you different compared to somebody else? This thing is like way off in perspective. My God, that's why it's feeling weird. You're just terrible at art. Hold up, let me fix that. But yeah, so the logical thing to, I guess, think about is, well, this person's having trouble finding work. Well, as a student, it's super discouraging. But what I will tell everybody, right, is that once you get to a certain level, that's, it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter how good somebody is versus the next in terms of art skill set, right? Because when it comes to painting something, right? Let's say anybody here, right? Anybody watching now or whatever, right? If we can all paint at the same level, what's the difference? I would probably hire the cheaper person, right? Like whoever, because we can all paint, right? Generally speaking, if you're at the state to where you are hireable, right? Just remember that it has to be, there is a bar, there is a requirement, right? Just let's make that clear. There is a certain skill set that you need to have, right? Once you get there, it doesn't actually matter anymore, right? Because most of the time, if they say, hey, I need you to paint this building, I need you to paint this thing, right? You can probably do it, right? You can probably do it just as well as I can, you could probably do it better than I can in some instances, right? There's people in this chat right now that can paint better than I can, right? In some instances. So why would they hire that person over me? Or why would they hire me over that person, right? So it's not really it's not really the best way to kind of go. It's not mentally like good to think about it that way, because that's going to destroy you, right? That's just going to, because there's so many good artists out there, even ones that are like struggling for work. There's so many damn good artists out there. So you don't want to go through your career thinking like that, right? And two, that's really not the only thing that we gauge artists off of, right? Because once you get to that certain level, what actually makes you special, right? Why would they hire you over somebody else, right? We had this project one time, I think I've talked about it before, where we were working with Sid Mead. We weren't directly with him, but it was working with a studio. That studio was also working with Sid Mead, so they hired us and hired that studio, and we were kind of feeding ideas into the same pot essentially, right? And our art team was like freaking out because we were like, dude, it's Sid Mead. Why the fuck do they need my shitty painting, shitty drawing? You know what I mean? Like, because this is like, so we're designing sci-fi ships, right? We're designing, a sci-fi world with like the god of concept art. You know what I'm saying? Or the father of concept art as we know it today. You know what I'm saying? And so what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to offer this? Because logically speaking, whatever Sid Mead pops out, that's going to get picked, right? And so when we were going through that project, there was this instance where my creative director came down, or I guess creative director / art director came down and was like, we're showing ideas, and he's like, what the hell's all this? And we were all like so focused on making the coolest or the best looking painting, right? He was like, we were all painting, and it was all like some generic ass ideas. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't great. It wasn't like the proudest work I've ever seen, right? Because I was like, I need to make the painting good because Sid Mead's on the other end, right? How do you compete with Sid Mead? So I'm trying to like paint my ass off, right? And then he sat us down and was like, all these ideas are really bad, guys. They're all like, it's the same idea, different envelope, higher painting levels each time. And it kind of like, he showed us, he was like, if you're trying to outpaint Sid Mead, it's probably not going to happen because, and this applies to any artist. If you're trying to outpaint any of these artists, it's probably not going to happen just because you don't have the time that this other artist has, right? You don't have the 20, 30, 40 years that this other person has. Because at the time, I'd only been working for like two years. You know what I mean? Like maybe even 1 year at that point, right? So the bottom of the barrel and the top of the food pyramid, right? Same project. And so he goes, so what makes you able to compete with somebody like that, right? And I was like, I don't know, just like better quality painting. He's like, no, because you're not going to outpaint him. You don't have the time. You don't have the experience. You don't have anything that this other artist has, right? But you have your experiences. You have your lived experiences, whatever it is, right? You have your interests. You have your, I guess, outlook on life, right? Because that's what actually makes you different. Because now, if you take into account the fact that you see things differently, or you're able to process references differently, or you're able to combine things in a cool way, or even bring in new ideas because of your lived experiences, that's what makes an artist different, right? Because you're not just painting a castle anymore, you're painting something that is unique to you. You're giving us a design that literally only you could think up. Yeah, quality might not be the best thing for you at that time, right? But most of the time, the quality is passable, right? It's good enough to kind of get the idea across, and that's really all that matters. You're able to, make stuff that makes sense, right? Like you look at it, and like even this quality alone, right? If I stopped right here, right now, this is a quality that is, I mean, I've passed shittier paintings than this in a production setting, right? I'm not proud of it, but it's not, this quality isn't like low in a production setting, right? And it's probably fine. And if this is the best you can do, it's probably fine. But what idea are you bringing to the table, right? Is this an idea that's truly unique and special? Obviously, this one isn't. We're just working on illustration. But, is this an idea that is unique to you or special in any way? This is why when you think about the form language week that I covered in June, right? Watch that if you haven't. There's that extra thing, right? The first three references, it was big, medium, and small, right? It was always like, pick things that are cool that you like, right? And really emphasizing the things that you like, right? All my mentorships, I always start, especially the ones that do projects, I'm always like, make a list of 30 things that make you, whatever it is, right? Hey, I like bikes. I like cameras. I like cars. I like whatever, right? Something that you're actually interested in. Make that list. And then when you choose your references, choose from that list. Don't pick the bullshit that everyone else is doing, right? Don't pick, military, World War, whatever stuff, right? Like, and some of that's fine. Like, I do that all the time, but don't let it be the main thing. If there's something that's like, something particular to you, it's like, oh, I like knitting or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, fucking do that. There was, I had a project, it wasn't like last term or anything. It was like last term or the term before that, one of those. It's literally one of the references was like hair in a drain. Like it was fucking nasty. You know what I mean? But the project ended up being really cool. And it was so unique. It was so interesting. It was a cool take, right? And so for those of you that are like, how do you compete with some of these artists that are, has decades of experience over you, right? Trying to find work. Yes, they have an advantage. They have experience, they have time, they have skill. Absolutely. But that does not mean that you are incapable of getting hired over them, right? Obviously, I'm not saying it's a completely even battlefield. Just know that, right? It's not even in any kind of way. But your skill set is not just your painting ability, right? Your ability to think, your ability to bring in new ideas, your outlook on life, your design sense, all those things are special to you. You just have to tap into it. Because this game that we're playing right now, where there's a bunch of people, trying to get hired, trying to find work, right? It's the same game we've been playing since the industry was in a good spot. It's the same exact one. It's who has the ideas that better link up with what our project needs. I've had so many projects like where I'll like either be in an interview process and they'll be like, "Oh, your paintings are pretty good, but we just went with this artist instead. They have kind of like these couple things that we're looking for." Generally speaking, I don't think I've been overlooked on projects because of my painting ability, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure there has been, but like the interviews that I actually get, like I had an interview at Riot one time, and they told me straight up, they're like, "Oh, it really wasn't your ability that stopped us from hiring you, right? It was something else. It was, oh, this other artist, we have a working experience with them, or their sense of fantasy elements was a little bit higher, so on and so forth, right?" And that's why they got hired, right? And that's fine. That's I'm not mad about it or anything. At least I think I'm not. But it is something that it just made me a little bit different in some regards to this other person, right? And it's not good or bad. It's just who you are. And so when you're applying for work and finding these places doing these things, just remember that, right? Yes, there is a level of skill that everybody needs to hit. You have to hit that because once you get to that bar, it doesn't really matter how much better you do, right? Like, yeah, the better at painting you get, the easier things will be, right? No doubt. But there's only a certain level you actually need to achieve. Once you're able to put whatever it is on a page that's in your head, if you can think it and then it can pop out on a page with relative ease, right? Generally speaking, you're already set for whatever it is whatever job comes at you from there on out. But now it's, well, what outlook can you offer to your project now? Does that make sense? So hopefully hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's not too cryptic or too long-winded or whatever for those that are listening. But I'm sure a lot of people here are experiencing that, right? A lot of people here are like, hey, this person's trying to look for work and they're having a hard time, and I'm not even close to that level, right? It's like, yeah, there's that, but there's other things that make you special, right? There's your outlook, there's your speed, right? Like, I mean, I've been hired just based on my output speed, just because they're like, hey, we need someone quick. We know this other artist, they're a little slower, they're really good, but they're not quite where we want them to be in terms of production output, right? And that's fine, right? There's so many different things that makes you different, So just remember that when you're going into like job interviews or going into like trying to find work and this and that. It's there's a bunch of different things that make you unique. There's a bunch of different skills that help you stand out. You just have to know what that is, right? And capitalize on it, right? If like I always try to mention like, oh yeah, like when I'm showing them a portfolio, I'll just casually slip it in there. It's like, oh yeah, that took about a day. They're like, what? It'd be like a finished painting. And I'm not lying by any means. It's not like I'm not like, just making shit up, because you have to perform on it, right? But you do mention some of those things because that's a skill that they need oftentimes. Everything in production is a goddamn emergency. You know what I mean? Which is bad. We need to fix that, absolutely. But everything is an emergency, because it's always, hey, we needed that yesterday. Can you finish that? And when they have somebody that's consistent, reliable, so on and so forth, it makes their job a lot easier. So just things to think about. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Very, I guess, I don't want to say short, but it's hopefully that, kind of puts in perspective for those of you kind of looking for work, maybe being discouraged and so on and so forth, right? So, yeah. Let's see. Where am I at here? I'm just making up buildings now. Boom.
I think one of the hardest parts about that, looking for someone consistent and reliable, is like if they don't know you, then the next thing they look for is your experience level. And if you don't have any experience to speak for, then that pretty much I think for a lot of people that would cancel you out immediately, because why would they take a risk on someone who looks like they can do good work, but they already have options that they know have done acceptable work before, and they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that's exactly it too, right? And that's that goes kind of hand in hand with what I've talked about before with like other classes or other even in sessions like these where I'm like, talk to people, do stuff, be around, tell people things, or like post stuff. For those of you that don't talk ever, right? It's not that I need you to talk here. It's that you never talk at all, and that's where the problems kind of happen because chances are the way you are here is the way you are everywhere, right? If you don't talk in a in one public space, right, you probably don't talk in other public spaces, right? Nobody probably knows you, and it's not a problem for me. I don't, it's not really that big a deal for me, but it's just remember that this is how people perceive you, right? And so if you're always wondering like how can I get some sort of advantage to get hired, or how can I get into this just better position where I'm able to get hired a lot easier, right? It's a lot of like letting people know you. You're learning like, hey, I need people to kind of learn who I am, and that only happens through communicating, right? You can't just expect people to just know who you are, know like what you're about right off the bat. Take classes with people, do things that, kind of put your work out there, right? Because that's what we're looking for, really. I'm just looking for people that that perform consistently and do what they need. And classes, mentorship, stuff like that are really great opportunities for stuff like that. It's an opportunity to show whoever's looking at you what you're capable of, right? Like, no shit. Like I'm telling you right now, most of my early jobs was literally because I took a class and I just showed them, hey, this is how good I am. This is what I'm capable. Not that I was like good, but this is how capable I am at doing certain things. I can do what you need me to do. And then when I'm looking for jobs, they'll reference that, right? Obviously it's not immediate, right? There's not it's not a like 100% guarantee, like right as soon as you get out of class, but they'll remember that. I remember that from people in my classes, and so just try your best, be around, and things do happen, right? It feels like it doesn't because things take forever, but generally speaking, right, things kind of turn around, generally speaking, right? But you have to put yourself out there. You have to keep posting. You have to keep doing work. You have to keep, talking, communicating, be in people's minds, because if you're not, they just don't remember you. It's so hard to remember anybody because there's so many people, right? Especially like for those of you that are like, for example, like even in this Discord, if your name isn't even your screen name, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, obviously this is an internet thing, right? I get that. But this is also a hiring platform, right? This is something where, the Digital Vegetables group isn't hiring, right? But the people in it are, right? There's a good amount of professionals in here, whether they talk or not. I know they see it, right? Because they'll like stuff every once in a while, or they'll say something so they're active, they're around. And so as you post, just remember there's eyes on this, right? And don't do this because you want eyes on your work. Do this because you genuinely want to get better. But just know that you're putting yourself out there, and you need people to be able to find you. So put your real name on it, right? It's like, don't put your address or social security number, right? That's we get that, right? But just putting your real name, because once I see like this painting is like, wow, that's a sick ass painting. Who did it? Oh, something 276. Like, what the hell? You know what I mean? Like, I can't even look that up, You really want to make sure that you're somebody, you're easily found. If you want somebody to find you, you got to make sure they can find you, right? Look up, like, and I dare everyone to try this, right? Go to your social medias, go to your Discord name, try to find yourself, right? Because I'll click on it, like, I'll see a painting sometimes, I'll click on a name, and I'm like, I can't even get to a portfolio, Like, I see the one painting, and that's cool, and I'm trying to look for other work, And then I'm like, okay, I'll click on the name, and you know how there's like a there's like that little profile thing that pops up, and there's some links. Some of you do that, absolutely. Some of you don't, and it's like, I can't even find you because your screen name's a different name, and then your Instagram is a different name from that screen name, and then maybe you don't post consistently on either one, and then you don't have a website or an ArtStation, and it's like you're impossible to find. How do you hire for that? And it's something that you got to do it. It's if you want to get hired, right? You don't want to be the fact that they couldn't find you, be the reason that you did not find work. It's as simple as that. It's the bare minimum, right? Just make it so they can hire you. You know what I'm saying? So, but yeah, there's because I think like I was saying a second ago, where your ability to find work isn't 100% dictated on your art skill. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's some art skill involved for sure, and it's a minimum requirement. But what are the other skills you need? What are the other things that you can do to make it so you're hireable? That's what you want to start finding out, because your painting skills is one avenue, and once they see your painting skills, right? They're like, wow, this person can paint really well. You usually get the interview, right? You usually be like, oh yeah, can you meet the team or whatever? And then you don't get hired again. Then you have to ask, like, wait, why didn't that work out? Why didn't I met the whole team? I met the art director. I went through 3 or 4 different levels of interviews, and I did not get it. What happened? Ask yourself why, and then more often than not, you'll find it's not your art skills that didn't get you that job. Cool. Let's see. Boom. Let's darken that down a little bit. There you go. Much better. So a lot of just, messing around, doing stuff. Oopsies. Command U. So at this point, right, we're getting at this repetitive point, right, where it's like, just making pieces, right? I did the first 3 buildings. I need to do this back building here, and then that one in the that kind of middle foreground area, and then yeah, we're just gonna kind of rinse and repeat. We'll add lights and stuff in the coming week. We'll kind of make some of those interior shapes look a lot better, but it's gonna be a lot of this, right? Clean up the shapes, make the details make sense. That's really all we're looking for, Once you have your nice silhouettes, use it to help inform, right? Clip in photos to get you there a little bit quicker. But overall, you can see me designing a lot of things. You can see me painting and actually making decisions here. Just try it out, see how it goes. And then hopefully using a lot of these techniques, you'll be able to come up with something a little bit more sophisticated, a little more interesting, and just better designed overall, right? Let's see, flip horizontal. Dude, look at that. Bro, come on. Too easy. Let's put that in perspective better. And I think for me, I'm really bad at just designing from scratch, right? But I can see it, I'll do it and I'm like, yeah, I can see that. You can see how it works. And then, just troubleshoot it. Be like, okay, what does it need? What pieces, I need to make this perspective look a little bit better. I need to do this, I need to do that. And slowly you just start coming up with some interesting pieces, interesting designs, the more you kind of do, right? Some of this stuff doesn't really make any sense. So I'm going to get rid of that, right? Boom. Let's do that. Don't really need that piece, right? But all this up here, that's pretty cool, right? And then I'm just going to make it make sense. Boom. Actually, what I'm going to do here is delete some of that. You can mask out part of your photo, right? I'm just using, a lot of this too is I'm using photos to kind of help me get a detail pass, right? Where I just need some noise. I just need, a level of information that kind of looks like high levels of detail. Very similar to what we were doing with last week with the silhouettes and stuff, right? It doesn't need 100% make sense. It just needs to look like it kind of makes sense, right? Because once they see it, the piece is there and the brain kind of does the rest, right? That's really all we're trying to do. So cool. Look at that, bro. How's life, guys? How goes the things? Oh, sci-fi. looking
Busy.
place. Busy, yeah. That's good to hear. Oh yeah, man, you're full time in your place now, right?
Yep. Yeah, been going for like I think almost like 2 months.
How's that
Not
been?
quite. It's good. It's fun. Super different. Nah, not exactly what I was expecting to be doing. Like working in engine and doing like final assets for things and stuff. But it's cool. It's like a lot of new learning.
So like, what was that like for you? Because that happens all the time, right? That's something where like, you never. I think I've said this before too, where it's like you never really know what you're going to be doing. And there's times like there's things where we learn in school, right, where it's like form language, perspective, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that I guess pop up that it's like, oh, I would have never known I need to do that because as the title of a concept artist, right? You don't really need to know Unreal, but some places want you to do it and they'll pay you to learn it, right? And so like, I guess how has that been for you? What are some like challenges that you kind of like encounter while doing some of those things?
Well, I think like what we're doing is pretty basic. Like on the engine side of stuff, it's more like copying and pasting like finished assets like just into the system. So it was just kind of like relearning a UI basically. And since I've done Blender, 3D Coat, Photoshop, and like everything, it was just like another one. Just had
Yeah.
to like grind through videos and figure out how to work around it. And they're super nice about teaching us like how to use it, and that they knew going into it that people wouldn't know. Like your average concept artist is probably not going to know how to like navigate around in Unity. Is what we're using.
Yeah. So when you like place things in a scene, like how like what happens? Like do they just give you models and you just throw it around? Like what goes on in your head when you're doing these things? I'm leading somewhere with
It's
this, by
all
the way.
it, it's all like 2D.
Yeah.
So it's like an indie studio, and so yeah, it's actually not too bad. Like I kind of like make the assets and then kind of go back and forth between Photoshop, like sketching ideas, and then it's all just kind of like composition, trying to make stuff that like flows together and looks cool. And then I do have to like think about the level and look at other levels and stuff like that too.
Dude, see, man, that's what I'm talking about, man. It's like, it's crazy because, yeah, like I said before, it's like there's times where whatever project, whatever place is nice enough to hire somebody that doesn't know a skill. And generally speaking, it's a skill that's not really expected. That's why they're like, if it's like, hey, I don't know Photoshop, yeah, they won't hire me, right? But it's like, hey, I don't know Unreal. It's like, well, most concept artists don't know that. So it's like, it's fine. Unless they like truly need some unicorn of an artist to like carry the entire production. Generally speaking, they'll give you time to learn it, right? Most studios will. And so like we can do this two different ways, right? There's the I've never done this, you should not expect me to do this, right? Or you can just be like, oh yeah, all right, I'll figure it out, And when you figure it out, you're just using your skills that you already knew. Composition things, right? We learned composition in school. We learned in classes. We learned graphic read. We learned clustering. We learned shape design. All these things, right? You even said it yourself. I was designing, going back to Photoshop, fixing composition, doing whatever. All these skills is what we use to help troubleshoot our problems, right? I think I had talked about this, not this exact thing, but like a problem like where it was like, oh, what is problem solving? Because they're like, our job is to problem solve, right? It's like, hey, you're a problem solver. As a student, you're like, what the fuck does that even mean? Because like I just paint, but in reality, right, it doesn't matter what you're using because you just you figure out what is needed. I need the player to go through this level. I need the player to go through these things, do this, do that. I need to guide the eye this way. I need to, there's, a lot of different things that it's just creating an experience for an audience, right? At the end of the day, that's what we do. We create an experience for the audience using our fundamental skills to help do that, right? Our storytelling ability, our compositions, perspective, design, so on and so forth. And it transfers just like that, right? You're not going to be always doing paintings like this. There's going to be a lot of problems that they ask you to figure out or ask you to do, and as a designer, you got to like figure out, well, how do I use my design skills to solve that problem, right? That's what you want to start doing. And I'm glad like it's like those things are kind of popping up, because that's what it is. There's things all the time. Like I working in animation, my production designer goes, "Oh yeah, your games background is going to be great for this thing that we need to design." Like it's animation, so why the hell are we doing game stuff? But I can't tell you what the assignment is. But there's a thing that I needed to do that is very reminiscent of what games does, right? Like there's I don't want to say too much, but there's a thing that happens in games a lot when you're designing for games, and it's such a big part of designing games that animation never does, right? Generally speaking, animation and like film and stuff never have to do this because for various reasons. So with my background in games, I was able to help solve this problem a lot more effectively, right? And it's weird things like that. You never really know when these skills kind of pop up, but it's just like design is basic design skills, general understanding of just what we do as a whole, entertainment designers, right? And it applies to everything. It's so cool seeing that just kind of pop up and be a part of the equation, so. But yeah, no, I'm glad it's working out, dude. That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I gotta figure out how to make time to keep working on 3D stuff, because I'm already forgetting everything.
Yeah, true that, man. I have a really hard time like trying to keep up with my 3D, because it's funny because I know 3D, right? I mean, know is a relative word, right? Know it from not, I guess, compared to not knowing it, right? But I'll get projects and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's we're doing this thing. I'm like, great, cool. And then like, oh, we really like your work because you don't really use 3D that much. I'm like, shit, because then I have to paint, which I'm fine with. I don't have an issue with that. It's just like because they're hiring me to paint. That means I'm using less 3D, which I'm not getting better at the 3D that I'm intending to get better at. And it's just this like, it's always this chase to like learn whatever the new technology is. It's it kind of sucks in that regard, but it is what it is. Boom. Let's see. Oops. Dude, this painting, bro. Let's go. So pretty quickly, right? I have one more building to do in that foreground. I mean, I have like 3 or 4 more buildings to do. But it's like so quickly we start seeing all these, like, everything starts filling out, right? Here, let me even show you where we came from literally 2 hours ago, And like, think about this. This painting, right, would be, I mean, I don't know, that the first painting here, right, this version right here would have probably been, I don't know, like 4 hours worth of work, maybe 3. I did it before class, so I think it was like an hour or 2, right? It wasn't even that long. And so you do a painting of this level, you get it approved, and then you go into this level of painting. We're not even, we're 4 hours into this, right, from this week and last week. Realistically, I'm actually probably like 1 hour into it, right? Half the time I'm talking shit and breaking away and doing things and explaining stuff. And so quickly you can see within an 8-hour day we can have almost a full painting done, right? Like I just have to obviously finish this off, right? So that's probably going to be, I'll give it like another 2 hours before I finish off like all the main kind of shapes that I'm doing here. Every building has like a version of like just architecture and stuff on it. And then probably another hour of like compositing where I'm like trying to get those clouds to work a little bit nicer. get some of those textures working a little bit better, and then just like, making airbrushy kind of moves and compositing and doing whatever, right? And so within like 2 days, 2 work days, 16 hours, you can have a finished painting really quickly. But it's really just understanding what steps you need and when you need to do it, right? Obviously, this is the second step. I'm not done yet. Obviously, I'm running out of time now. I only got 4 minutes left. But like, first step being clean up your silhouettes. Make sure your shapes are super clean. The cleaner your shapes are, the easier it is to do the second step, because the second step is what I'm using to kind of like, I'm using the shapes to create a good shape to clip in my photo textures in. And looking at this, you can't tell I used a ship carrier. You know what I mean? I mean, people watching be like, oh, I see it. It's like, no, you don't. You know what I mean? Like, if you saw this straight up, you're like, wow, this guy knows how to design sci-fi. I really don't. I just know how to use photos effectively, right? And so from here, I just need to clean up some of those windows, which I'll do. And then, I'm just using assets to kind of speed things up, using photos and then painting those down, and then using those painted down photos to make more buildings to then throw into other buildings. And it's just this constant like buildup of like speed, detail, understanding, right? And you're just kind of going through it pretty quickly, right? So hopefully this all makes sense. Definitely, obviously I'm not expecting anybody to do it at this speed, to do it like this consistently, right? But it's just something to think about, right? Just think about, how can I use my pieces more and more effectively? I literally have 4 pieces here, 3 of which is from the same photo. This is that, and then these are just derivatives of that, right? It's that right there, and this panel, I think it's the same panel, to be completely honest, right? I think it's that right there, right? Just stretched out, and it's right there. And so it's the same thing. It's 2 pieces. I made the silhouette, and then I used the internal shape, and automatically you can already start getting a pretty clean painting because of it, right? It just takes some graphic read, some atmosphere to kind of make that pop off. I'm going to continue this just throughout the week, and then I'll kind of show you where to get to next week. We're going to be doing, I think, lighting and compositing, lighting and effects and stuff next week to just kind of push this and make it better. I'll probably do, it's not going to take me that long to do the next step, so I'm probably going to do a bit of design on the ship as well, right? A lot of this really was focused on like that kind of background elements and just the environment as a whole. So I'm going to kind of show you how I do it maybe a little bit differently with a ship, right? Because this is something we need to fully be looking at, right? So but yeah, give me 1 second. Hold up, I need to open the door. Yo, sorry about that. I was 4 minutes away, guys. Come on. No, I was like 1 minute away. I was expecting a package today because we're dying of heat here. So I was getting another fan. Anyway, but yeah, like I was saying, right? Pretty easy breakdown. Hopefully this makes sense. Take your time, right? A lot of the times, it's really like me zooming in like 400, 500%, right? Like get in there, clean things up, right? Because you really only have to do it once or twice, right? Because that piece, like I made this foreground piece here. I need to clean that up a little bit more too, but I made the foreground piece, and then I made the secondary piece here, and I use that piece to make this other middle piece here, but then I use that piece to make this other building here, and I'm just kind of slowly working my way through it, right? So just kind of know that, right? It's easier than you think. It takes a little bit of practice to kind of get creative with how you use things, but just know you can, but yeah. So if there's any questions, definitely leave it in the comments, message me directly, put it in the Discord, whatever it is, get it to me. We'll talk about it, right? A lot of these questions that pop up during the streams, especially the ones that are from, you guys, those are more relevant, right? I really like those because they're actual problems that you're experiencing. They're actual things that you're going through. So I'd love to talk about that the most, but if not, I always try to bring topics just to kind of keep things active and bring up things I actually feel are pretty important, right? There are some things where it's like I'll talk about some skill things, but generally speaking, it's more mentality, more general understandings of how this industry works, things that students are experiencing that you're not alone in experiencing, and stuff like that. So with that in mind, that's all I got for you this week. So for those of you that kind of following along, just start pushing into those interior shapes. Make this painting look pretty solid. There's going to be a lack of compositing happening. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that next week. Clean up those interior shapes. Make the exterior shapes kind of hold the silhouette together. Use photos, use painting. Doesn't matter. Use both. And it's probably going to get you, hopefully something that looks pretty good. So with that in mind, guys, that's all I got for you. So if there's nothing else, I will see you next week. Cool. All right. Later, guys. Oh, yeah. Sorry, my mouse is not working.